Imagine a single policy written almost 220 years ago that has shaped the course of US foreign policy for centuries, dictating when America would intervene, when it would stay silent, and how it would deal with the rest of the world. That policy is the Monroe Doctrine, and its story is as fascinating as it is controversial. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving deep into the Monroe Doctrine, its origins, the reasoning behind it, how it evolved over time, and why it still influences the American role in the world today. Whether you are a history buff or just curious about international politics, this is a journey worth taking. The year was 1823. The United States of America was a young nation, still defining its place on the global stage. Across the Atlantic, many Latin American nations were shaking off European colonial rule. It was the era of good feelings in America. An extremely popular president, James Monroe, advised by Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, issued a bold statement to the world. The Western Hemisphere was off limits to new European colonization. In return, the US promised to stay out of European wars. We all know how that promise worked out. The excerpt from President Monroe's speech to Congress, which refers to this doctrine, is as follows, and let me quote. Our policy in regard to Europe, which was adopted at an early stage of the wars which have so long agitated that quarter of the globe, nevertheless remains the same, which is not to interfere in the internal concerns of any of its powers, to consider the government de facto as the legitimate government for us, to cultivate friendly relations with it, and to preserve those relations by a frank, firm, and manly policy meeting in all instances the just claims of every power, submitting to injuries from none. But in regard to these continents, circumstances are eminently and conspicuously different. It is impossible that the Allied powers should extend their political system to any portion of either continent without endangering our peace and happiness, nor can anyone believe that our southern brethren, if left to themselves, would adopt it of their own accord. It is equally impossible, therefore, that we should behold such interposition in any form with indifference. If we look to the comparative strength and resources of Spain and those new governments and their distance from each other, it must be obvious that she can never subdue them. It is still the true policy of the United States to leave the parties to themselves, in the hope that other powers will pursue the same course. End quote. At its core, the Monroe Doctrine was a mix of idealism and pragmatism, protecting fledgling American nations, asserting US influence in the hemisphere, and avoiding entanglement in Europe's conflicts. Why did Monroe and Adams feel this was necessary? Europe was recovering from the Napoleonic Wars and had monarchies that looked hungrily at the Americas. The US, militarily weak but strategically ambitious, needed a policy that would deter European intervention without risking a direct conflict. The doctrine cleverly combined moral rhetoric with national self-interest. The new world is ours to protect, and we'll stay out of your old world wars. Again, we know how that worked out. The Monroe Doctrine did not stay static. By the early 20th century, Theodore Roosevelt added the Roosevelt Corollary, effectively saying the US could intervene in Latin America to stabilize the region. Later, during the Cold War, it became a justification to counter Soviet influence in the hemisphere. From Cuba to Nicaragua, the Monroe Doctrine was cited as moral and political cover for interventions. Yet, it also evolved in perception, from a protective policy to a tool of influence, sometimes criticized as a form of Big Brother imperialism. Today, the Monroe Doctrine isn't invoked by presidents every year, but its shadow lingers. It set the precedent for America's role in the Americas and the world, justifying strategic alliances, interventions, and regional policies. Modern debates over Venezuela, Cuba, or even US-China competition in Latin America echo the principles of the Monroe Doctrine. Who decides the balance of power in the Western Hemisphere? So the Monroe Doctrine began as a simple warning to European powers in 1823, evolved into a cornerstone of US foreign policy, and still influences decisions today. It is a reminder that a single policy, if well timed and well framed, can shape global affairs for centuries. If you found this dive into US history fascinating, answer the following question in the comments. Do you think the Monroe Doctrine was visionary, or was it American overreach?